Should hopefully see folks trickling in here. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you all here. You're welcome back to a Move Minneapolis webinar. This is our first in a while with a refreshed team, some of whom you're seeing on your screen here. And we're really excited to be back in front of you. I'm going to set the stage for us here, get a couple of the logistical items out of the way that I'm sure you're used to hearing at most webinars. So this is currently being recorded. You'll likely see a notification on your screen when you join us. This will also be posted on our YouTube channel after the fact. So just to make sure everyone is aware of that as well. A couple of things to knock out of the way as folks are joining us. So we are enabling Zoom's closed captioning feature here. And if you need any information on how to activate that and make that visible on your screen, we will make sure to get that over to you. You can drop that in the chat or in the Q&A function, and I'll make sure I jump on getting some help out with that as well. That is a new service for us, and we want to make sure that we continue to improve that. So please let me know if there's any way I can help with that in the future. So we're gonna have a bit of a full house today. We're gonna be able to highlight a lot of our experts here and really give them the floor to share. So I asked, in respect for everyone's time, that we're going to hold questions and answer those until after our presenters are able to finish up their section. And then we'll facilitate what can be dropped in the Q&A function that is available as well. All right, well, since we've got folks, a good number of folks in now, I'm going to kind of get us started, set the stage, and really make sure know why we're here and having this conversation as we get started. So commute requirements and service availability are changing. Many folks are being called back to the offices, and the demand for street space is changing for those who never stopped commuting. I'm going to be honest, commutes can be daunting, especially at this precipice where we're in between service comfortability and availability, stuck in a chicken and egg scenario with the number of people who are commuting, and when folks feel like they can take that on and really be comfortable doing that. We're not going to have all the answers for commutes beyond the 9 to 5 today. However, we're going to continue to make sure that we're doing our job to prioritize information availability for folks who are our most vulnerable road users at the most vulnerable times as well. All right. So who am I? My name's Carl Hedlund, he, him. I'm an outreach specialist for Move Minneapolis. I spent many years taking 2 a.m. commutes home from a catering prep kitchen just north of Broadway back to my home on Lake Street. So this is a common question for me when I'm not on my bike commuting, which is my main form year round. My bus into work is the 5, and my bus to groceries is the 21. To break it down, really, if you're looking for someone to talk about your commute to the grocery store or your commute into work, I'm the transportation nerd who's going to love talking to you about that. So you're more than welcome to reach out to me with any questions, as well as anyone at the Move Minneapolis office. Who is Move Minneapolis? Move Minneapolis is a leader in sustainable transportation. We facilitate joy-filled, safe commutes that are not dependent on single occupancy vehicles. We operate as a liaison between our transportation partners, some of whom you'll hear from today, and folks using our streets. We're here to improve your own commute, as well as provide services for employers and building owners who have the opportunity to enable easy, safe, and sustainable commuting. That's enough about me. Again, I'm going to give the floor to our experts who are here to share. First, you're going to hear from Cindy Harper from Metro Transit. She's going to talk about the current status of transit services and how those services and the changes are being determined. Then Ted Depner from Bike MN, who's going to break down biking and walking after dark, some of the best things you should be aware of if you want to take it on, as well as what opportunities are out there to make sure that you are being safe along the way as well. And then we're going to wrap it up with Suzanne Sobotka from Move Minnesota, who's going to grapple with some of these transportation barriers and how we envision a more accessible future for the commute beyond the 9 to 5. After that time, my coworker John will wrap us up with some of those modes beyond our transportation experts and give you some points of where you can engage with us in the future if you want to learn more. With that all being said, I'm going to hand over the floor to our first guest, Cindy. And as she starts sharing her screen, I'm going to introduce her. So Cindy Harper is a senior manager of route planning in Metro Transit's Service Development Division. She's been in the transit industry for more than 25 years, most of that time with Metro Transit. Previously, she worked on several route and sector restructurings associated with new transit ways, including North Star, Green Line, Orange Line, and the A, C, and now D arterial BRT projects. She is the immediate past chair of APTA's Multimodal Operation Planning Subcommittee. Originally from Central Illinois, she's a graduate of Elmhurst College in suburban Chicago. Her husband is also in the transit industry working with contracted operations. And as a result, our vacations include a lot of riding transit in new places. So I think I'm gonna have to give Cindy a call about that in the future. Cindy, if you could just switch the presenter view for your slides, we're viewing them as well.
Great, thank you. Give me just a second. How's that?
I'm
now
still
it's saying it's paused.
The presenter
New
view.
share.
Perfect. Thanks again for jumping in the chat. We'll get it worked out here.
Okay. Hold on.
Awesome.
Resume share. That's what I was looking for. Okay, and I know I now have the wrong screen up, so hold on just a second.
No worries. While we're using this time, I also want to mention that my coworkers, Catherine and Tiffany, will be helping me keep an eye on the chat as well as the Q&A function. Can others give me a confirmation if we're seeing the correct screen here?
Now we are.
Awesome. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay, we're has everyone seen the correct screen now? Ready to go, I believe. Great.
It's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. As Carl said, my name is Cindy Harper. I am the Senior Manager of Route Planning in our Service Development Division at Metro Transit. And thank you for the opportunity to come and present this afternoon. Transit really plays a key role in the success of downtown Minneapolis. So we want to make sure that we are getting it right coming out of the pandemic. Today, I'm going to review what it is we've learned during COVID, both in terms of service and ridership, how the operator shortage is impacting us, and then last but certainly not least, our path forward. Okay. So like pretty much everybody else in the world, COVID had a significant and immediate impact on transit, and we are still waiting for the quote new normal to emerge. Almost right away, we cut about 1/3 of our scheduled service, encouraged people not to ride unless they had no other option, and implemented load limits in order to allow for social distancing. As things have slowly reopened, we have restored some of the service. Now we're back at about 80% of our pre-COVID level of service. Masks continue to be required per federal mandate. And our most resilient route are the arterial BRT lines. So that's the A line and the C line, as well as many of our core local routes. So the the 5, the 10, the 18, the 21, which lost fewer rides in comparison because these riders generally aren't working from home and driving isn't always an option. These tables show some of our COVID service trends. So the bar chart on the left shows that overall, we are running between 80 and 85% of the number of trips that we ran before COVID back in late 2019. On the local types of routes, that's we're higher than that. BRT is actually at over 100% because the orange line opened last December. And then you see for commuter rail and commuter express, that's where we're still at pretty low numbers, about 25 to 30%. The graph on the right shows our ridership by hour. The black line shows travel patterns pre-COVID, which used to spike between 6 and 9 in the morning, and then roughly again between 3 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Now what we're seeing is that our PM peak is much reduced, and actually before students started coming back to school last fall, we weren't seeing really any AM peak at all. And then our PM peak also, while still exists, is certainly scaled back and of a much shorter duration. This map shows service that has been suspended due to the pandemic, which has impacted routes around the region. There are currently 62 routes that are suspended. And for our commuter express route network, 51 of the 66 routes are suspended. So on this map, the orange lines are routes that are operating, and the purple lines show areas where service has been suspended and there is no alternative service available. So for example, in North Minneapolis, Route 19 operates on Highway 55 and on Penn Avenue. That route is suspended, but the C line runs in that same corridor on those same streets. So you don't see any sort of a purple line in that area of North Minneapolis. Most of the areas that are coming through, meaning they have no alternative service, are further out in the suburbs and associated with peak-only commuter route branches, that's front routes that serve downtown and the U of M. These charts show the impacts that the pandemic has had on our ridership. We've seen a severe drop on all types of routes with varying levels of rebounding starting to happen. The graph on the left is total weekday boardings. The blue is the core local routes, pink is LRT. And as you can see, they are rebuilding faster than the others compared to pre-pandemic. We're at currently about 70,000 weekday boardings on the core local routes. We were at just about 115,000 pre-COVID. So you can see where that's at. And then the chart on the graph on the right shows the percent change in ridership compared to pre-pandemic. The red line at the bottom is our commuter express routes, which as you can see are still down more than 80% in ridership compared to pre-COVID. Another challenging aspect of COVID or impact of COVID has been a severe operator shortage. So like most other sectors of the economy, we are very short-staffed, and this is really the story at transit agencies around the country. We are competing for the same pool of candidates that school districts are looking at for bus drivers, and delivery services such as Amazon are looking to hire, so it's very competitive. The table on the left shows the discrepancy between the number of operators that we have available, which is the red line, and the number that we need in order to operate all of our scheduled service, which is the blue line. So while we were pleased not to have any layoffs when COVID hit, as you can see by the red line staying up here, the blue line, the actual service dropped, we were able to still find work for everybody. We did pause our hiring, and as a result are still trying to catch up. And this chart shows the number of canceled trips that we've had in the past 4 to 6 months, this past fall and winter. Anytime we've have to cancel a trip that's on the schedule, that negatively impacts our riders and our reliability. And our numbers spiked considerably, especially on Mondays and Fridays. We did reduce some service back in early December in an attempt to right-size the amount of service we have with the number of operators we have, but it wasn't enough to fight off Omicron. And as you can see, the first half of January was particularly ugly. The situation is doing much better now, although anytime we have to cancel even one trip, that's not good. So as a result, service changes that we're going to implement at the end of the month will continue to reduce our operator requirement. These latest changes will reduce frequency on some of our routes that run most often, where ridership has lagged, and so we have excess capacity available. We aren't suspending any additional routes in their entirety, but service on some segments of routes will be suspended. All of the routes that are in our high frequency network will still run at least every 15 minutes, but some of them will see slight decreases in the number of trips. For example, a route that runs every 10 minutes today may now run every 12 minutes or every 15 minutes instead. So our goal is to certainly minimize the impacts felt by riders with having alternative trips available within a reasonable amount of time. So in terms of our path forward here, we are still waiting for the dust to settle, but we have learned some lessons that we are applying as we move forward. First, all signs are pointing that some element of telecommuting is here to stay. The work commute was and still is a key market for transit. So if we have some people that work from home even just 1 or 2 days a week, that's still a 20 to 40% decrease in demand. Also, we're not quite sure how many are going to drive to the office versus welcome back to using transit, although it will be interesting to see the impacts that $4 per gallon gas will have on that as well. We have learned that all-day frequent service serves a variety of trip purposes, really has been the most resilient. And that's what we need to focus on as we look to rebuild our ridership. Single purpose trips, transit that's designed for just a single purpose, like a 9 to 5 commute trip, for example, is the most fragile to disruption. That's been the most vulnerable, and that's what we've seen as well. As we work on rebuilding ridership, really we need to be focusing on the speed and the reliability of our well-used local service. At this point, we aren't looking to make any long-term decisions on routes that are suspended through the rest of 2022, and rest assured, before any final decisions are made, there will be a community input process. So we will definitely be going back to the community for feedback on those routes. And even though we are at the point where, for the most part, we don't have to cancel any scheduled trips anymore, we still don't really have the workforce to add or restore service until our hiring efforts are more successful. So as people return to the office environment and other pre-pandemic activities, we need to maintain flexibility to be able to respond to changes in the market or changes in resources that are available. So after basically 2 years of no system growth, as you can imagine, we have a very long list of projects on the table, ranging from everything from restoring frequency and span on some of our existing core network, including LRT, preparing for future transit ways, and providing options for commuters that match the new travel demand patterns into the downtowns. As we evaluate all of our possibilities and set priorities, serving those who ride transit the most and rely on us for their basic mobility needs will continue to be our top priority. Looking forward for our June service changes, we likely aren't going to have any significant changes from what's on the street after the March 26 changes. However, there is scheduled to have a 5 to 6 week shutdown of the Blue Line out in Bloomington, the portion of the route between Mall of America and Terminal 2 Humphrey Station. So we will need to run a bus bridge replacement for that corridor, which of course means you're talking about operators. And then also we're very excited that construction is on schedule. We're still on track for the opening of the new Metro D line between Brooklyn Center Transit Center and the Mall of America which will mostly replace the Route 5 later this year. And I believe we're going to leave questions till the end, but I did want to note that Carl from Move Minneapolis does have my contact information. So if you'd like to reach out offline, if you'd prefer to have a conversation offline, I've given him the okay to give my contact information for that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. I really appreciate that. We're gonna again, we're with respect to everyone's time, we're not going to be able to answer all the questions in chat during the time today. However, we're going to be able to address those followed up via email or other ways as well. And I promise we'll get to all of them. Cindy, I had one question I wanted to pose to you specifically that was asked in the question and answer. It was asking about the ridership numbers for the express lines. So seeking some comparison between current ridership numbers with only the lines that are remaining. So I know you had the one slide that shared some comparison of ridership percentages for the different types of lines. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit more?
Sure. So, obviously it makes sense that if the majority of our commuter express service is suspended right now, then ridership on the lines even that are remaining will be quite low. That's not a surprise. And really looking at, what happened with the downtown Minneapolis office market and downtown St. Paul office market as well, for that matter. I think that was a move that made sense to us at the time. We have been working under kind of a strategy of really trying to still rely on our park and ride networks and really looking at the major highway corridors that feed into downtown Minneapolis from all directions. So at this point, what we were really trying to achieve is making sure that we have in each of those major corridors at least one park and ride that's open, offering express service into the downtown, not nearly at maybe every 5 to 10 minute frequency that it used to pre-COVID, more like maybe every 15 to 30 minutes. But that's kind of been our approach, is to try to make sure we have at least one express option in each of the major highway corridors. And then from that point on, kind of looking to either rebuild or reinvest resources.
Awesome. Thank you for covering that. Again, with the questions directly to Cindy, we're going to make sure we follow up on those with you after the webinar. And we're going to, with that in mind, I'm going to respect everyone's time and push us on to Ted Depner from the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Awesome. As you're sharing your screen again, I'm just going to read you a brief introduction. Ted has been using his bike as a main source of transportation year-round in Minnesota since 2003, including 15 years commuting 20+ miles per day. He has always strived to incorporate bicycle advocacy and encourage ridership wherever he has found himself. Legitimizing cycling and walking for transportation has been and remains a central component of his identity. When not on his bike, you may find him canoeing, hiking, fishing, hunting, playing yard games, losing at board games, or doing some light foraging for wild foods or pretty rocks. And the one thing I'll add is that I severely miss Ted's four-legged friend, who was our office dog during my time at Bike MN as well.
Ted, well, good news. That's a perfect pivot, Carl, because that's what I was going to share next. But yeah, so thank you for having me on here. Really exciting to see how many people are attending this. So obviously it's a kind of a high demand topic. So this is again me, and that is the dog in question. That's Frida, and that, as you can see, that's not a single occupancy vehicle. They're more than just myself there. And I could talk to you, I could give you an entire webinar on just this bicycle and this dog, but I know that's not our topic, so we'll kind of kick it off here. So just lightly, what I'm going to cover, because there are tons of ways to get kind of lost in the weeds here when it comes to like just bicycle commuting in general, or walking, running, especially when it comes to being in the dark. So the difference between the ability to see and being seen yourself, some lighting options, and just some other considerations kind of as we go through. And as previous speakers said too, I'm happy to chat with any of you individually. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. So this is, I think, a pretty good visual about the difference between be seen and see. So the bicyclist on the left, as you might be able to tell, there's not an awful lot of light being transmitted from the front of their bicycle, so they might not even have a headlight on at all. But you can see how well they stand out. You know, they've got reflective tires, shoe coverings, portions of their jacket, their helmet, etc. And then you've got this large group in front with some powerful headlights, and they're going to be doing some trail riding, so they definitely need to be able to see the trail. So that is kind of a lot of the distinctions, you know, between, you know, for your different purposes and stuff like that, and maybe the different areas you're going to be commuting, depending on if it's just within the downtown area where it's fairly well lit, you might not require a super powerful light that actually you need to light up the road itself for navigation and to avoid debris and potholes and things like that. But you know, as well as being able to make sure that you're visible to others. And so here's a few more details kind of on that along those lines. So we've got our good, better, and best. So, you know, legally, you know, as a bicycle commuter, in the when you're riding in the dark, you have to have a white front light that's visible from 500 feet and a rear light reflector. A lot of folks think that's counterintuitive, think that it makes more sense that you would be required to have a red rear light, but we can get lost in the semantics there. We definitely think both would be, you know, that's why that's the better approach. So not just being in compliance with the law, but making sure that you know, you are visible from the front and back and side. So, you know, wearing reflective clothing is helpful. And then, you know, we think the best is a headlight that's bright enough to allow you to see the road conditions themselves. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. So we've come like even like the time that I've been commuting, like leaps and bounds when it comes to lighting technology, and all you probably know that just based on the cell phone you have and how bright the little headlight is on, excuse me, the flashlight is on that, thanks to LEDs. But for many others, this is what maybe some of you remember using for lighting, you know, from like even the 70s. So this is like the old Dynamo system where it's a generator that actually sits against your tire. As it only lights up while you're pedaling or while the bike itself is moving. So it shuts completely off if you're at an intersection or any other reason. So we've come a long way there. So newer lights are going to have LEDs, and as such, they last a long time. They get a lot of battery power. I remember having like a light that had like 4 AA's, and it would last maybe a couple hours. It was super heavy and very expensive to kind of keep, you know, adding batteries and things like that. So, and that's, you know, something I wanted to touch on too is Dynamo Lighting. So in the modern one, so this is a bicycle. It's not my bicycle, but I have this exact same headlight, and this light is actually connected to the hub on the front wheel. And so as you are moving, this light charges an internal battery, so it will stay lit if you are at a stoplight or something like that. But it emits a lot of light, and it actually really doesn't have that much drag. If you're interested in a system like this, almost any shop in town can kind of hook you up with something like this. One I'll particularly note, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, is a Perennial Cycle on Hennepin. There's a mechanic there whose name is Carl, who's very into this thing, built an entire kind of contraption to kind of measure the different kinds of drag and all things like that. So the drawbacks to that, you're like, why doesn't everybody have that? That sounds amazing. It is expensive. The hub itself is expensive. The lights can be expensive, but for the bikes that I have these systems on, it's great that you just always have that. You know, you never have to worry if your lights are charged, you know, if you forgot them or things like that. So that's really nice. And then just mounting flexibility. If you're in the market for a new helmet, this is my helmet. As you can see, I've got a tail light that just clips onto the back. and this entire top piece is actually reflective too. I actually really like helmet mounted headlights, so that way wherever you turn your head is what you see. So that is actually really helpful should there ever need to be repairs or things like that. I actually see a lot of joggers in my neighborhood use headlamps and things like that, and that's actually really helpful for them to see and be seen as well. Almost anything is gonna be better than nothing. So you probably are familiar with these, you know, just kind of little strap-on ones. Sometimes they're just like little giveaways for, you know, bike events and things like that. They're great if you have nothing else, but they do have a little watch battery that I have no idea how much power is left in these. You know, so when you start them on, you don't know if you might turn it on and maybe you get a block away and it shuts off because you just have no idea. So I actually think this, if you're on a budget, is an excellent choice. These are super cheap. You can get them almost anywhere. And in fact, we have a surplus of them. Send me an email if you want one, and you know, if you're strapped for cash or something, I will get you one. And when we took our league certified instructor training, it really was illuminating, for lack of a better word, like how well these kind of reflective vests stand out. That's why they require, you know, construction workers and others, you know, to wear them and stuff like that. So let's see here. Other considerations. I think, you know, making your commute fun. So just because you're bike commuting doesn't mean you shouldn't have be able to listen to a podcast or some music while you're going along. It actually does help you be heard by others around you. So if you're on a busy trail or something like that, they might hear you before they see you. Your Bluetooth can also give you directions. Lots of times I'm not necessarily going home after work. I might be going to meet up with friends or somewhere else. And so I punch some directions in and my speaker tells me where to go. So that way I'm not looking at my phone and things like that. Ultimately, just avoid headphones, earbuds, or anything that's gonna make it so you can't hear, you know, what's going on around you. I say dress the part. You know, if you have sensitive eyes like me, you might want to look at some clear lenses and stuff like that for dark time commuting, especially like in the summer. You'll go like by the river or something and there's clouds of gnats and stuff like that. That can be annoying. So that's something to think about too. And learn. Like Carl mentioned, although I've been bike commuting for, you know, over a decade, and I like to think that I'm fairly well cognizant of what I should be doing. Taking like a class that kind of really went a little deeper on these things really did improve my skills dramatically to make sure that I'm keeping myself safe as I'm like on the roadways and things like that. So I would encourage everybody, regardless of your skill level, if you've never taken a class like that, to check it out. We occasionally offer those at Bike and Men, but there's a website called Cycling Savvy. They have kind of a virtual program that is fantastic too. So recommend checking that out. And then, you know, personal safety, this is a reality, you know, we wanted to touch on, but, you know, I'd say, you know, if you have a repair or a flat, obviously it's going to be easier if you're in a well-lit area as well, but if you can walk your bike to a more well-lit spot and stuff like that to attend to it, or, you know, call somebody for help or whatever it is. And then, you know, ride or walk with a friend. There are many, it's a great way to get a coworker to maybe commute with you. You know, I had a friend, a co-working commuting buddy for a while, and, you know, our rides were together for about 75%, then we split ways. So that was kind of a nice way to kind of look at that. You know, and sometimes you vary up your route. Maybe the way you got to work isn't the way you're going to go home, because, you know, it might be a darker area and things like that. I avoided a different route home yesterday because I knew it was going to be icy along, you know, Minnehaha Parkway and stuff like that. So it's good to be flexible and not just have a single route. Yeah, bad weather is something you always need to worry about in bike commuting. But you know, when it's dark, that makes that even more of an issue. Headlights don't light up the roadway like they do when it's dry, you know, and things like that. Drivers can see less out of, you know, windshields that have snow, ice, you know, rain on them and things like that too. So just, you know, other ways that like to, you know, make sure that you are more visible, which is why lots of jogging and biking raincoats have a lot of reflective material. Bike security. Well, number one, you should pressure your employer to provide you with secure bike parking. So, and if you can, bring your bike into your office, itself, and that's probably the best thing to do. I wasn't able to do that for the time that I biked downtown. So I would use 2 U-locks, and I would recommend it. Bike theft is a total bummer. It's a huge reality for cities that are popular to bike in. So I would be aware of that. And then make sure you register your bike. With the city of Minneapolis, there's no fee to it, but that way, if it ever ends up at a pawn shop or somebody dumps it somewhere or gets recovered, they can scan that, and then it will come back to you, and you can be reunited with it as well. Yeah, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but test your route. Don't do your bike commute the first time that you need to be somewhere. When it's like a high stress situation and something like that, do it on that Sunday afternoon where you have nowhere to be, and you can like make adjustments and stuff like that. Think about, okay, if this road was closed, where would I go? That kind of thing, and can actually make it fun that way as well. So hopefully I didn't talk too fast there. Just kind of touch on a few other things. And on the bike security thing, if you have the means, it's a great reason to get another bike. If you want to get a cheaper used bike, there are some swaps coming up and things like that. Supply chain issues are a real thing right now. So the used bike market is kind of a booming thing, but there are some great resources there. Also, e-bikes are getting to be huge. Bike Amen is going to have a few webinars dedicated specifically to this. We're going to have a table at the convention center April 2nd and 3rd, and I know there's going to be tons of interest in e-bikes. It seems like they're just flying off the shelf and stuff like that too. So that might be something you want to check out too. I think that is about it for me. Yeah, happy to take direct questions and stuff like that. There's our website, bikeamen.org, my email, and again, yeah, thanks y'all so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you again, Ted. I'll jump in here. So Move Minneapolis does have some branded of those better than nothing lights. If you see us at an event, watch for us at the open streets this year. We can get one to you, and any other event that we're at as well. And if you're curious about a bike commute into downtown and some of those suggestions, like giving it a try beforehand, take a look at Move Minneapolis's blog. My coworker Catherine wrote a blog about adapting to a new commute into our new office downtown Minneapolis. Again, we're going to keep it moving pretty quickly, but we'll follow up with all of our questions. If you are interested in working with, if you are an employer, or if you're interested in working with your employer to talk about things like secure bike storage, Move Minneapolis is the person to talk to. So give us a call if you're interested in talking about best options or consulting on secure bike parking, bike rooms, or any other amenities like that as well. The one moment I'm going to open this up to here with Q&A is I see we have someone raising their hand in chat. Dominic, I'm going to give you an opportunity. If you are interested in posing a question, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, if you're not intending to have your hand up, feel free to let it down. Dominic, if you're interested in asking, oh, no question there. All right, I'm gonna keep us moving along to our last speaker here. So Suzanne, if you're willing to start sharing your screen. Awesome. Suzanne Sobotka oversees transportation, legislative, and policy efforts at all levels of government and guides research efforts to make the case for a transportation system that is fair and just for all. Suzanne brings nearly a decade of legislative and policymaking experience to Move Minnesota, having served in various staff roles at the Minnesota Senate and as the senior policy advisor for transportation and environment for Governor Tim Walz. Suzanne holds a master's of public public health degree in epidemiology and master's of arts degree in health journalism from the University of Minnesota. As a resident of the West 7th neighborhood of St. Paul, she enjoys easy access to transit and active transportation and looks forward to development of new transit routes and corridors nearby. Suzanne, whenever you're ready.
Great. Can you see the slideshow version of this?
We are.
Great. All right, I have just a few slides, so I'll run through just a couple of them and then can stop sharing my screen. And you can look at just me as we talk about what could be possible as we're reimagining the 24/7 commute. Thank you for the introduction, Carl, and thank you for having me here today. For those of you who are not familiar with Move Minnesota, we have a couple different roles. We are the TMO for the city of St. Paul. We also are an advocacy organization and are a lead member of a coalition called Transportation Forward, which works with partner organizations in a variety of capacities. So environmental groups, disability advocacy groups, social and economic justice advocacy groups, to make the case for why transit and active transportation is important. And we certainly do a lot of thinking about how the transit system works well and encouraging people to use it as it works well, and also how we can make it better. So first of all, why it's important is that there really is no area of good public policy and just good practices that transit and transportation does not touch. We know that connections to housing, connections to education, connections to healthcare are so critical. And we hear quite frequently from folks who are advocating for housing, who get folks who were in unsheltered situations or insecure housing situations sheltered, and then the bus doesn't come by their house. And we have a whole new problem with them needing to get access to a car. Same thing with healthcare clinics who call us up and say all of a sudden we have a bunch of patients who are no-shows. And when we call and ask why they're not there, they tell us it's because they couldn't get there. If you're an employer and you're starting to think about other things that are important to your organization, like sustainability, are you contemplating how your employees are getting to work and not just how you're energizing your office or moving freight? These are important considerations to make. And we're happy to help folks out with that as well. So thinking about what an ideal 24/7 commute could look like, I think that both Cindy and Ted have touched on a lot of these components of it. So it would be frequent and reliable in all corners of the metro, and maybe it would use multiple modes. Maybe it wouldn't just be buses or bikes. Maybe it would be microtransit or other levels of service. It would be specifically engineered to work well. There would be dedicated bus lanes. The bus would be prioritized in the traffic signals. It would recognize the fact that transit is a way to move more people more efficiently, so it should move really efficiently. It would be safe and welcoming for all. All riders, we know it's a real concern for folks who are returning to the office. So we can talk a little bit about ways to make that the case on our transit system. It would also be just for everyone. We can talk a little bit about what is happening in other cities in terms of people who fail to pay their fare, and where free fares is happening in some really major metropolitan areas and also some peer metropolitan areas to the Twin Cities. And as Ted made some great points, it would be self and welcoming for all when biking, walking, and rolling. And I can talk a little bit about the state bicycle code and some things that could be done there that would improve that. So I have just one more slide, and it's a lovely map to show you. This is generally what Move Minnesota is advocating for when we're talking with local and state elected officials. That we envision that within the next 10 years, the metro would have this beautiful comprehensive transit system. And these colored lines here illustrate future bus rapid transit lines. So I'm sure you're all familiar, but bus rapid transit is a service that has a lot of the same conveniences and features as something like light rail. You pay your fare off board, you can board from any door, and it has signal prioritization and some additional infrastructure at stops that make it more convenient and user-friendly. The curbs match up with where the bus starts so that people in wheelchairs can roll on, that sort of thing. This network would be of enough quality, speed, frequency, and reliability that everyone would be interested in using it. I like to use the analogy that if you can imagine that your only way of getting around was that your garage door opened once every 30 minutes and only for 30 seconds, you would find that wholly unacceptable. And yet it is what we ask transit riders to do all the time, every day. So got to keep that in mind. It would have sufficient coverage and walkability for folks within the Beltway to walk or bike to a transit stop, and they could forego car ownership, which is really expensive. It can be upwards of $9,000 a year for car payments, gas payments, insurance, maintenance, and repairs. It would dramatically improve the lives of folks who rely on it, and it would roll out in a relatively swift manner within these next 10 years to address all of the climate challenges we face, equity challenges we face. All right, I will stop sharing and go back just mentally to the list that I rolled out. So thinking about frequency and reliability and thinking about the bus rapid transit map, some of those lines are already built out, and we know that bus rapid transit experienced the lowest, it maintained the highest amount of ridership, in the sense it had the lowest decrease in ridership on the A and C lines that operate up in Brooklyn Center and through Minneapolis and St. Paul on the A line. There's additional routes in the works, the B and D lines, which will replace the 21, and the D line, which will run on Chicago Avenue in Minneapolis, have already secured funding and construction is underway. We're making great progress on the E line, which will run from Southdale and Edina and terminate in the Westgate station in St. Paul. And there are 3 additional lines that we're really hoping can secure funding at the legislature. The F line, which will run on Central Avenue, the G line, which will help fill in a bit of a transit drought over in the East Metro, running from West St. Paul through downtown St. Paul and up on Rice Street. And the H line, which replaced the number 3 running on Como and Maryland Avenues in St. Paul and Minneapolis. So all that will go a long way to helping build out that map that I showed you quickly. It would be a much larger map as well, with connections to the suburbs, contemplating a return to the office. But what that looks like in a 24-hour commute, you can really you can think hard on imagining, right? Microtransit is something that both Southwest Transit has tried out and had some success with. And Metro Transit is also doing a pilot of microtransit in North Minneapolis this spring. So it will be exciting to see what those sort of levels of service bring in terms of frequency and reliability on the system. The transit system would be engineered to work well. As I mentioned, dedicated bus lanes and signal prioritization are a great way to do this. And we've seen it work really well in other places. During the pandemic, both Cambridge, Massachusetts and Houston, Texas implemented dedicated bus lanes and traffic signal prioritization on some of their highest ridership routes. And on average, it cuts commute time by about 20%. And when you think about the service cuts that we're seeing across the board, making the bus system run more efficiently could be a really good way to hedge against some of that lack of reliability and that lack of availability of service. And currently, if you pay attention to transit news, I'm sure you know that there's ongoing discussions in terms of dedicated bus lanes on both Hennepin Avenue and Lake Street, where some of that bus rapid transit is planned, with advocates pushing for those bus lanes to be 24/7 in operation, which would obviously help a 24/7 commute pretty greatly. In terms of safety, this is something that we hear from employers quite a bit, is that their workers are going to be returning to the office, but they're concerned about whether or not their employees would be safe on transit. Now, Okay, the best thing you can do to make transit more safe is to have more people use it. The more eyes and ears that are on the bus or train, the less likely there is to be trouble on the train because there's more people there. Metro Transit has made some efforts to do something about that with a community service officer program that was launched last July, and I believe they're still hiring up for that, which is great. It focuses on students in law enforcement programs filling those positions. It is different than the way that other transit systems across the country pursue safety programs. Typically, these positions are filled by people who are called transit ambassadors, who may have a law enforcement background, but may also have a background in customer service or social services. And they can do things like help people with wayfinding. So if you don't know where the light rail train connects with the number 65 bus route, they can tell you. If someone is playing their music, not using headphones on the train, they can remind them that's against the code of conduct and they shouldn't be doing that. And they can generally just be a welcoming presence with more folks there. It would be a priority to ensure that all transit riders would interact with someone from Metro Transit as a part of their transit experience to make that feel a little bit safer as they're making their commute. And as I mentioned, as we're kind of transitioning into the next item, making transit just for all, another thing that in most metropolitan areas transit ambassadors do is they're able to check fares. In Minnesota right now, that is not possible because fare non-payment is a misdemeanor crime punishable with a fine of up to $180. We would like to see that be a civil penalty, which would mean that officers would not need to check the fares in order to issue that civil penalty. And it would be more akin to a parking ticket. It'd be more like a $35 fine. But transit ambassadors, especially those with a social service focus, might be able to get at the root cause of why someone didn't pay their fare. If it's because they can't afford it, perhaps they can give them information on the Transit Assistance Program, which provides low fares for folks who are on other qualifying social services programs. Or maybe just the fare machine's broken and they need to call it into maintenance. It could be that simple as opposed to immediately having to snap to a misdemeanor with $180 tickets. And of course, if it doesn't cost anything to take transit, then it's not a crime not to pay your fare. And I know this seems ambitious, but it's happening in other places. Kansas City, Missouri does not charge fares. Albuquerque, New Mexico just recently made that change late last year. And the new mayor of Boston ordered that fares would be free for the next 2 years on some of the highest ridership bus routes in Boston. So this is not a crazy idea. It is happening elsewhere and really emphasizes that transit is a public good that helps everyone get around. And just very finally, very briefly on making biking, walking, and rolling safe for all. Ted did a great job talking about some of the safety measures you can take. There's also some things, of course, with engineering in terms of what are called pork chop islands. I'm sure you've seen them where you make a right turn that's not in the intersection, it's just slightly out there, which sort of deserts pedestrians and folks who are rolling on those islands and is not exactly the safest circumstance. So it's a consideration. The other thing is that the state bicycle code for Minnesota that determines what safety measures riders need to take while they're operating a bicycle has not been updated since the 1970s. And there is a proposal out right now to update the state bicycle code to say that instead of riders needing to ride as far to the right as practicable, would say that the rider can ride as far to the right as they feel safe, which would go a long way to making biking a lot more safe for a lot more Minnesotans. So those are just some ideas. I am sure folks out there have a lot more ideas on how we could make a 24/7 commute a bit more safe, but also glad to take questions and share my contact information through Carl. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I'm really glad you highlighted some of those different levels of where we're at with BRT lines. If you have your ear on the transportation world right now, you're going to be hearing a lot of conversation about the E-line and in the future about that 24/7 question specifically. If you want to learn more and kind of hear where people's opinions lie, keep an eye on Move Minneapolis's Facebook later this evening, actually, where we'll be sharing a snippet of an interview with Representative Frank Hornstein, speaking to his priorities for the future roadway of the E-line in the near future. Again, please continue to drop your questions through the Q&A function. That all being said, we're going to wrap up, coming to the final stages of our time here today. I'm going to hand it over to my coworker, John, to touch just very briefly on some of the other modes that you haven't heard from our experts and really highlight some of the areas that if you want to learn more about, come and talk to Move Minneapolis and we can help you learn more about them. But again, John, whenever you're ready to share your screen, we'll give you really a brief introduction to what you can expect for these options beyond the 9 to 5.
Sure. Thank you very much, Carl. I think you've disabled my screen sharing capability. If you can activate that, and I'm going. Sure. And I'm going to.
All right with you. I'm just going to share my screen and let you speak to them.
Yep. Go ahead. And I will be abbreviating in the interest of time. So I'll rapidly go through this. We only have a few short minutes.
All right.
Okay.
Here we are whenever you're ready.
Oh, let's see.
Here, you can give it a
oh, there you
start
go.
there.
There you go. Okay. Okay, I'm John Barb's Outreach Manager for Move Minneapolis, and we've had a number of discussions of different modes for traveling and using transportation beyond the 9 to 5. As we see, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for the 24-hour commute that perfectly addresses everybody's commuting needs or affordability. But the key word is options, and we're here to help fill some of those gaps that can really help the entire community. And so I'm going to touch on some of the areas that were not discussed. Move Minneapolis, we register carpools for the ABC ramps, which are in the northern part of downtown Minneapolis between Target Field and Target Center. And carpooling is really one of these opportunities to be able to really expand a sustainable transportation mode beyond just the core city area. Because after all, you're taking a car off the road when you have 2 or more people in your vehicle. And especially when you're looking at saving gas money at over $4 a gallon, sharing parking expenses, it really makes sense. But if you register a carpool, you can really save money and earn even more benefits. So the ABC Ramps Mobility Hub is a place where you can register a carpool and you can park for $20 a month using carpool parking. And that's by far the lowest cost. So why carpool? Well, the money savings, you can also utilize the Easy Pass lane for free. A huge benefit is the lower emissions. Like I said, you're taking at least 1 vehicle off the road. And it's an opportunity to also downsize, let's say from a 2-car family to a 1-car family, if you're utilizing carpooling and then using transit and some of the other means. That's a tremendous money savings as well. And we're talking about carpooling outside of the 9 to 5 hours. We have literally registered dozens of people who work for the Minnesota Twins and Timberwolves games. So they're commuting from all places from throughout the Twin Cities, and they're able to park, do their work, and they're paying $20 a month, whereas everybody else is paying the event fee for parking, which is often $10 to $15, depending upon where you park. So this same benefit also applies for the hospitality workers who are supporting the fans at the bars and restaurants and hotels as well, and who don't necessarily have 9 to 5 hours. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay. I already hit that one. All right.
I'm going to jump in here really quickly, John. So I want to make sure anyone in Minneapolis knows that Metro West is the service provider for Metro Mobility. If you're eligible, feel free to visit their website and make sure you're up to date on all of that. I really do want to highlight that service is available through Metro Mobility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are a few limitations in that. So reservation hours are between 6 a.m. and 5 p.m. You can make those reservations over the phone. There's an online portal as well as fax, actually. And for the busiest hours, there's no same day requests between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Back over to you, John.
All right, thank you. Go ahead and hit the next slide. All right. Ted talked a little bit about biking. I'm going to take it one step beyond. Nice Ride in scooters are going to be out on the streets again very shortly. I will just really quickly address that for commuting modes on the outside of the 9 to 5. This is an excellent option. For affordability, there's an affordability program that is available. So it's a $5 membership if you are eligible. This would include people that receive like financial aid through student loans, SNAP, through TAP, SSI, Medicaid, and so on. It gives you the option to use the green bikes for 45-minute increments for free and discounted prices off the e-bikes and scooters. There's also a corporate program too. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. So kind of segueing right from bike share onto car share. Our car has a fleet of over 50 vehicles in the Twin Cities that are stationed at hubs. They recently launched and are managing EV, which is a all-electric fleet, and they're installing charging stations throughout the Twin Cities. Again, if you are a member, and especially if you live in this mapped area, which is called the EV home area, you can use EV for commuting. That would mean if your workplace is within that area and you live within that area, because you don't have to park in front of or at a hub location like you do for our car. There's also an affordability program which makes short-term rental for EV. You're driving an electric Chevy Bolt, affordable and easy to do. By the end of the year, there'll be the full fleet dispatched along with all of the charging stations. And next slide, please.
Yeah, John, I'm going to jump in really quickly. I just want to make sure that we are respecting everyone's time as we're at the time here. There's just a couple more slides. I'm going to make sure in the follow-up email that links to these get included. So there was recently some really awesome visualization of some of the streets that are quantitatively considered more pedestrian friendly. I'm going to make sure that article and some of those graphics get shared out afterwards, as well as Move Minneapolis has worked with Metro Transit to develop a one-pager on some of the public safety tips and tricks to make sure that's available for anyone who attended the webinar as well. That all being said, I'm gonna wrap us up here. A big thank you to all of our speakers as well as anyone joined us. Keep an eye out for a follow-up email with some of that more information. My own email is available at the bottom of the screen here, carl@moveminneapolis.org. And we're gonna make sure to keep you up to date on everything that's changing as we go here. Again, thank you all for being here. We're gonna wrap it up. Thank you again, and keep an eye out there for any further information that follows up.